You have to be honest with yourself. I'm going to take y'all back to the time between Georgia's game with Alabama in December of 2021 and their game with Bama in January of 2022. Of course, one for the Southeastern Conference Championship, the other for the national championship for the college football playoff. And that's what Kirby said about his team, about himself, etc. He said, you have to be honest with yourself. And the further we get away from that game and the longer we get away from the 2021 season, the more that trickles out about, that the period of time between those games. And, you know, while everyone on the internet um, was curious as to if Georgia would make a replacement at quarterback. And remember, Stetson Bennett, I don't know if that was the worst game he played in 2022. I'm going to go to the Stetson Bennett statistics here so I can speak halfway intelligently. But he did not play well against Alabama in Atlanta. Whereas, in Indianapolis, that was a different conversation for sure, particularly on that last drive. He went 29 of 48 with 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, 340 yards. He was sacked 3 times against Alabama and Atlanta. In Indianapolis, he went 17 from 26, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, 5 sacks, which was the most he had been sacked all season. Some of that has to be him attempting to run. But anyway, the only team other than Alabama that sacked Stetson multiple times in 2021 was Tennessee, and that was twice. So Georgia really protected Stetson well. He had a sack here and there against Auburn, Kentucky, Florida, but generally speaking, even against Georgia Tech, but they really kept him upright the bulk of the time. But it wasn't just Stetson, it was everything. The defense was not playing well. Um, and they came back the next day in 2021 after the game in Atlanta, and they had a real assessment of their situation. Um, Georgia knew it could not play the way that it did against Alabama and legitimately expect to beat Michigan, let alone to beat Alabama. And excuse me. This is I include this in the book. He says, I look at all the time. This is Kirby. You have to be brutally honest with yourself at a time like this. You have to be able to go through and say, who are we? What are we doing well? Maybe we're not as good as we thought we in some areas. Where can we improve that? Sometimes you only see that through a loss. We try to see it through victories throughout the year, but the guys were great today, talking about Sunday. They wanted to have a players only meeting. A couple of the guys stood up and spoke. I thought that was great that they did that on their own. They were a really good space today. This is in DAWGSTRUCTION. Of course, I've talked about it a lot. It's a great time to take advantage of our deal. You get DAWGSTRUCTION, you buy DAWGSTRUCTION today. It's an 80-page commemorative edition looking back on the 2021 season with stuff you're not going to get anywhere else, honestly. I don't know if there's any. I'm trying to think. No one who actually covers the team has put a book out that kind of looks at the season. So this is rare, and you need to get it for yourself. I'm running out of books. I continue to say that. I'm probably going to have to order some this week. But if you get it, you also get our 2022 preview, and I can assure you, no one else is doing this. This is a legitimate season preview. It's something you're not going to find anywhere else. And right now, it's not something you can find on bookshelves. It's not going to be at the bookstore. It's not going to be anywhere. You need to order it down below. Both of them are down below. The only place you can get DAWGSTRUCTION, if they still have it, and the only place that you can get the 2022 preview is at Red Zone on Clayton Street. It's a really cool store. A lot of artwork and plenty of shirts, but nonetheless, you can pick up DAWGSTRUCTION as well as the 20. I think you can pick up DAWGSTRUCTION there. I need to call Scott, but Scott and Mindy have had it there for a while. There are a couple of signed editions there, but you can get the 2022 preview. Georgia, it was called. Remember that there was a lot of negativity after the Alabama game the first time, no question. Now, I will tell you, and I think I said this soon thereafter, but I had someone call me who's been in the ball game for a long time, and I remember where I was. I was underneath bleachers, way at the top of the dome, um, gathering some stuff. And his view was, he said, I think Georgia's probably going to win when they play Alabama again. He said, I just don't know if they're going to get past the first game, which turned out to be Michigan, because this was at about 9 o'clock at night, maybe 9:30, 9:45, and we were trying to leave the dome to get back to Athens, and they felt like Georgia matched up well with Alabama, but that everything Alabama did that night worked, and that Georgia was not so far from really getting control of the game. Remember, Georgia was up 10-0 in that game, if I'm not mistaken, against Alabama, and then all of a sudden, Bama hit one play, and Georgia. I think they thought that game would be easy. I mean, looking back on it and talking with people, I think they felt like yeah, they were up 10-0 in the second quarter, and Alabama exploded for 24 points. Georgia just scored a touchdown. I mean, the game was only 24-17 at the half, but it felt like it was over at half. I mean, they were down a touchdown. That was it. But the shock of seeing how well Alabama played offensively was the big thing. So it was really the defense that had to step up, okay, for Georgia to really play well and win. And they did not that day. They did not play well. Um, they did not get pressure on Bryce Young the way that you need to. And we saw now Bryce Young, this guy is exceptionally good. And I mean, he was my number one for Heisman. I voted him number one. I cannot remember who was 2 and 3, but I voted him one for sure. Stroud was probably two. I can go back and look. Anyway, what we saw from that guy was in back-to-back games, Georgia and Alabama, Georgia and Auburn for Bama. He fought the whole time. The difference was in the Alabama game, in the Auburn game, they deserved to lose that game, and he saved it for them. They deserved to beat Georgia, and they did. But when they got to Indianapolis, everything that Auburn had done to them, Georgia did to them times five. Bryce Young did not have time to throw the football. This was the time at which you saw Georgia's defense unleashed. And yes, it was generational, no question. But Georgia's defenses have been pretty good, generally speaking, the entire time that Kirby's been there. So they did not play well against Alabama in Atlanta, and Alabama was the better team, period. They should have won. They did win. It's what it was. When you saw them correct, or whatever you want to call it, they just got after Bryce Young's ass. And he still, that guy, kept them in the game. They didn't score touchdowns, but he still kept them in the game. But it was just too much. And he was throwing from his backside. He was backpedaling the whole time. And Young wound up 35 for 57, y'all. He threw 57 times. It's just way too many times for 369 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. And honestly, the last interception with Keeley, that's a bad play. That was a bad play by Bryce Young. It was a bad read. It was underthrown. It was all of it. It was a mistake. And you know, as happens, you're not going to get these images anywhere else. Mistakes happen, and in this case, it cost Alabama a chance to win the national championship. They played well, but Georgia looked at, as Kirby said, you have to be honest with yourself. What was Georgia good at? Really affecting the pass rush. I mean, really affecting the passer by stopping the run and then letting loose with these pass rushers. But you know, the the truth is too, if you're Alabama and you score a touchdown, that's not going to get it done. And that's all they did. It just wasn't good enough. And Alabama fans, I do look forward to your excuse making below. Ain't no excuse making in Atlanta. Alabama just whipped Georgia's ass. And guess what happened in Indianapolis? Alabama got their ass whipped. It happens, y'all. I'm not, I don't, it happens. But, Bam, you cannot go into a national championship game, LSU 2011, and expect to score a touchdown or fewer and really expect to win. Like, it's not going to happen. Okay. So the field goal, they had a 14 play drive, Alabama, for 56 yards, field goal, 47-yard drive, field goal, 55-yard field goal, 72-yard 10 play drive, field goal. It's just way too many field goals. I mean, I think Bama didn't, I don't want to be wrong about this. I don't think they got into the red zone but one time with their offense. Now, the defense set them up inside there because of the play against Stetson. But again, now, if Georgia gets credit for pressuring Bryce Young, Alabama gets gets credit for the pressure and the mistake that Stetson Bennett was forced into and made. I mean, you're allowed to pressure the other team. You're allowed to force mistakes. This is part of sports. But Georgia went back and talked probably very sensibly. You're talking about N'Kobe, Nolan, Jordan. These are not hotheads, okay? These are guys that realized what was going on and that their path was still in front of them. Alabama, to their credit too, against Auburn, look, they should have lost the game. And in many ways, winning games you're supposed to lose, you should get more credit for that because that's a big deal. I'm trying to think. There was a Cincinnati game, Georgia against Cincinnati in the Peach Bowl. I mean, Cincinnati was the better team for 55 minutes of that game, and then they should have won, but they didn't. So who really deserves the praise there? And I would say it's Georgia because they won. I think Alabama deserved the praise for Atlanta, but when it came down to it, Georgia adjusted. They could adjust. Alabama could not, and that was the problem. Georgia stopped the run completely in a way they did not in Atlanta. They slowed the run in Atlanta, but that run game was enough for Alabama to get going. And they hurt Georgia that night. They won the SEC championship, but a few weeks later, it was a very different story.